Hello everyone, welcome to episode 59 of the Scottish Liberty Podcast. I have been extraordinarily busy with the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh this month, August every year, the biggest theatre and performance festival in the world. And as a consequence of that, we've not been able to record a new show. However, I do have an excellent, well, I think it's excellent, you might think it's average, mediocre, or you might think it transcends excellent. You might think it's the best goddamn interview ever. We were kindly asked by Riley Blake to join him on his show, Anarcho Agenda, and we agreed. How magnanimous of us was that? I have got that interview in the can, and that's what I'm going to play you as episode 59 of the Scottish Liberty Podcast.
If you have been following Anarcho Agenda for quite some time, you know I love Scotland and Scottish culture and history and Scottish music. This time, I actually have some people from Scotland. Tom Laird and Antony Sammeroff host the Scottish Libertarian podcast, and they are joining me via Skype from Scotland. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us on your show.
Yeah, thanks. Great.
You're welcome. This is episode 24 of Anarcho Agenda, and first of all, describe your path to liberty.
Okay, you go first, Anthony, on that one.
Okay, well, let's see. I thought I would put some videos up on the internet speaking about politics when I was kind of a progressive, and little did I know that Ron Paul was just about to burst onto the horizon, and with him a whole bunch of enthusiastic libertarians who gate crashed onto my channel and started leaving critical comments and sending me to this video, that video, and the other. And it took a little bit of convincing, but finally the libertarians won me over, and I was forced to eat humble pie and change my positions on economics.
My introduction to liberty and libertarianism really, it was a long time coming. Prior to this, I'd been involved. I'm a lot older than Anthony. You can't probably tell.
A lot older.
Yeah,
a lot older.
It's almost obscene.
Yeah. He's almost old enough to be my dad.
Well, you say that. So anyway, I started out on the extreme right of the spectrum. Gave all that up in my sort of mid to late 20s, and I was politically agnostic for a long time. I'd given up. I didn't even vote anymore. I was also a member of the Scottish National Party at one time in my life because I believed in independence, still do. And believe it or not, I was into a band. I'm into my rock and metal and stuff like that, and I was into a band called Stuck Mojo. Don't know if you've ever heard of them.
I've never heard of them.
Okay, they're from the south. I guess I think they're from Atlanta, but yeah. So anyhow, they had an album out called Rising, and at the very start of that album, there was a guy doing a monologue. The guy's name was Neil Burtz, and he had a radio show out of Atlanta that was syndicated throughout the US. But the monologue was basically a monologue against Clinton, and calling him, a despot, and saying that he was the most corrupt president in the US history. Whether that's true or not, but I kind of liked the sound of that. I was going, hey, this is odd for a rock band to be coming from the right of the spectrum as I saw it. So I checked out Neil Burtz's radio station, and they're on it. I liked some of the stuff that I read, and they asked you to do this sort of political quiz, a Q&A type thing, and I'd done it. So I did it, and the result that it threw up was that I was a right libertarian, and I thought, that can't be right. It sounds too much like a liberal. I'll try again. Something's obviously going drastically wrong here. So I did it again, and it was still right libertarian, and I thought, what the hell is a libertarian, and that was really my introduction. Once I started to look into it, I thought, yeah, you know what, I mean, at that time I was still pretty much into the drug war, though. I've always been quite anti-drugs. I still am, but now I just think that I shouldn't be allowed to tell other people what to do. So that was my introduction into libertarianism, and it just got better from there on in. I found out all these cool people that I liked already, like Penn Jillette and Doug Stanhope, were libertarians. Drew Carey was a libertarian. I thought, this is just,
what about Dave Navarro?
I wasn't aware of that at the time, but all these cool people that I thought that I really liked and respected.
Is Dave Navarro cool, or is he just a libertarian because he's rich and famous and wants to keep his money?
I have no idea. You can tell me.
Well, not that there's anything wrong with being rich.
So that's my long-winded intro into libertarianism. I hope it was interesting for your listeners.
I thought it was really interesting that both of you had an interesting path to liberty.
What's interesting is we both came from opposite directions. Anthony came kind of from the left, and I came from the right, and we've met in the middle, and here we are. Here I am, stuck in the middle with him.
Right on.
What is the state of Scottish independence nowadays? It seems like some people are predicting that it's completely dead after the recent parliamentary elections.
Okay. I don't need to lead on that one. I think, basically the Scottish National Party screwed it up. They got involved instead of sticking to the script and sticking to what they were all about. That was their whole raison d'etre from the start, independence, and they got involved in too many other things. They started a love affair with the European Union. And it just confused an issue, and a lot of people like myself are saying, well, guys, what's the point here? I thought we were for independence. Now it looks like you just want to exchange one union for another. It's like you think being one voice in 29 is something.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like to me. I mean, I've been watching this here in the States, and it looks like they wanted to trade, like you said, another union for another union, and I was like, really? Why don't you just want to stand on your own 2 feet and be your own nation and be an independent voice in the world?
It's crazy. Exactly. And a lot of the people who, it's funny the way that it's activated the issue, because Scotland was so much more for the European Union than England was in the Brexit vote. More people north of the border voted in favour of the European Union. It's very much confused the issue of Scottish independence for a lot of libertarians who were strongly in favour of Scottish independence, because it's now it's like, well, if there was another referendum for independence, it's like, well, I don't know if I'd vote yes now, because if I'm voting yes just to go back into the EU, that's not something that I could be in favour of.
Now, also, just to let your listeners know, so not all libertarians and even members of the Libertarian Party are for Scottish independence. Some are for the Union, the UK Union, for various reasons, but I think probably the main one is they fear the consequences of an independent Scotland, in as much as it would seem that, left-wing parties would have a free rein, And that's the big fear for a lot of libertarians in Scotland, that Scotland would become more left-wing and would be like a socialist hellscape within about 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, and that could be a huge concern if they become a socialist country, because socialism is, in my opinion, this great evil that has dominated European life.
Yeah. And I get it. When I speak to people who would be otherwise sympathetic to self-determination, and they say, well, look, as much as I don't like the union with the UK, I certainly don't want one with the EU, and I certainly don't want a Scotland dominated by left-wing parties. But you know what? Even the Conservatives in the UK are moving to the left anyway. A lot of their policies are indistinguishable from the liberal left. So
they raised the minimum wage. I mean, they opposed its introduction under Tony Blair when the Labour Party were in power, but they since then, they've said, oh, we were wrong about the minimum wage and things like that. Stuff like that, which is just entirely populist. They don't come out and say, well, not only will the minimum wage destroy jobs, but it'll increase the price of goods so that people on low incomes won't be able to afford it. They don't actually get out and make arguments for capitalism or free markets at all. They don't represent...
Yeah.
No one does. That's why we need to exist, basically. If
Right.
they did... If someone did, then we could, just hang out, and have fun. But the thing is, no one's really bringing the argument forward for free markets and capitalism here. So we have to do it.
So, since we're talking about minimum wage, what do you guys think about a living wage? Because it seems like a lot of people, especially here in the States, are in favor of this concept of a living wage.
Okay. Antony?
Well, do you mean the universal basic income, or do you mean just if someone has a job, they should be entitled to a living wage, like the wage that it costs to live?
Let's talk about both.
Okay.
Okay, well, there are two separate questions. The problem with the living wage is the same problem with the minimum wage, which is that it's trying to bribe people with a kind of short-term benefit, but the long-term costs are immeasurable. So if you increase the minimum wage to what it would cost to live, okay, that might be some good for some people who keep their jobs. It's going to stop job growth in the long term, but more importantly, people aren't going to be able to get access to on-the-job training because no one is going to pay you to train you when you're not making them any money back. If you could take a job at a lower wage, yeah, you're taking a lower wage in the short term, but you're learning skills on the job, and in the long term you could get a wage that's much higher than the living wage, and you won't need the government to insure it for you because it will be in your person, it will be based on your skills. The other thing is that it puts people in a weaker bargaining position when it comes to the workforce. If you can just walk out of a job at any time and into another job, you go, yeah, I'm going to get paid less, but at least I don't need to deal with this boss who's an asshole. And the aggregate of everyone being able to leave a job where their boss is an asshole and walk into another job is that the general working standards will be higher because it costs companies a lot of money to keep on taking on new staff if everyone keeps on walking out. So I fear that well-intentioned policies like the minimum wage or the living wage actually put the poor in a weaker position. You should also look at what makes the cost of living so expensive. Why can't a bunch of young people get a small apartment and live 6 to a flat? Okay, it would be a little bit crowded, but
Yeah,
no
it would
more
be.
so than people lived through most of history. We've gone into the country here and seen little bothies that are, one room cottages with a bed in it and a kitchen, and they say families of 10 used to live in a house like this. But in the short, it would be worth it for them if they could learn skills and put money away so that they could get their own place at some time, but none of that's allowed because of government regulations. So I say anything like living wage or minimum wage is wrong-minded. You need to look at why the cost of living is so expensive, open up free trade so we can get cheap goods from the poorest countries in the world. That will help the poorest people get richer, and it'll also help the poorest people in this country. But, I think if your audience is libertarian, they know quite a lot about the economics of minimum wage and living wage. As for do you want to add anything to what I've said?
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, for me, I accept all the economic arguments, but for me, there's a moral imperative, which is I have the right to make my own contract as an individual, with my employer for whatever price is acceptable to me. It's a personal contract between me and my employer. I don't see that the government has any right to interfere in that contract. If they can tell me a minimum wage, then the next step is they can tell me the maximum wage, then they can tell me what job I can take and what job I can't take, then they can tell me where I can work and where I can't work, and when I can work and when I can't. So there's no end to government interference once you go down that road.
Sure.
But with the universal basic income, I know it's something that we looked into even as a party here in Scotland. We thought that as a mechanism to move away from welfare and onto something more sustainable, or better than what we have, then it might be a possibility. But whatever way we looked at it, it seemed to work out more expensive than the current setup. And that's basically what we came out with. But I know that I can just say that in Glasgow, here in Scotland, I know they're talking about launching a pilot scheme of universal basic income. So it would be interesting to see how that works out. So we'll keep an eye on that. But Anthony?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of the places where they've done studies on the universal basic income, they've gone, look, we've given people a universal basic income, and they've gone out and they've started businesses and stuff like that. But there were some factors that they didn't take into account, one of which is they knew they were only going to be getting it for a while, so that they invested it in the long-term future. And secondly, where was the money for the basic income coming from? Was it being taxed within the community that was receiving it? No, I think it was brought from outside the community. So, of course, I could go over to my neighbour's house and take their TV and their bass guitar and bring it into my apartment and go, look, I'm living so much better. But what you don't see is where that money comes from and the good it's not doing. Mm-hmm. So I agree completely with Tam on the moral argument. Which is, first of all, to provide a universal basic income, unless it's provided by donation, which I'm all for, you do have to initiate force and take resources from the working people and give it to people who are not producing things that other people want to consume and are freely willing to part with their limited resources to consume. I agree on the moral argument. I talk more about the economic argument because I think it's a good way to start people getting interested in our ideas, but ultimately you want to sell them on the compassion of libertarianism, but I think ultimately people need to sometime or another come around to the NAP, otherwise they're not going to be libertarians. Yeah. And I think Tam's very strong on that side of it. I'd like to discuss the economic implications of policies, because I think people, at the end of the day, compassion is important to them, and they want to know that the consequences of policies they believe in are going to be good as well.
So let's talk about the Scottish Libertarian Party. I was doing some research one day to see if there was a Scottish Libertarian Party and was really quite surprised and pleased to see that there was one. So how long has the Scottish Libertarian Party been in existence? Okay.
As a party, technically speaking, about 4 years. As a movement, we've kind of been there. At one time, we were part of the United Kingdom Libertarian Party, and we decided, that the way the wind was blowing, I believe Scottish independence is inevitability. It's just a matter of arithmetic and population and time. I think possibly my grandchildren will probably look back and think and wonder why anybody ever thought, being part of an economic and political union with another country was a good idea. But we just decided that was the way the wind was blowing, and it would just be easier for us to conduct ourselves and conduct a business as the Scottish Libertarian Party, as opposed to a small branch of the UK Libertarian Party. So the UK Libertarian Party had to make a change to their constitution in order for us to do that. And they did so. Thanks very much to them. And it wasn't acrimonious. It was like, okay, yeah, fair enough. Off you go. And that's exactly what we did. So it's been around, I think, 4 years since that actually happened. And since then, we started. I remember when I first started to look at the Libertarian website in Scotland. Week in, week out, month in, month out, there was never anything happening, but now we have, we're a proper political party. We've actually put up candidates in local elections and in the national Scottish elections. We've had candidates stand, and we have regular meetups, regular events, and the party is growing slowly but surely. But libertarianism's a hard sell in Scotland. I think it's a hard sell in general, but it's a hard
really
sell.
is, especially here in the States. But I imagine more so in Scotland, because it seems to me, at least from my perspective, Scotland has been ruled by kings, has been ruled by a parliament, and socialism seems to appeal more to the populace than liberty.
Well, I mean, it always comes back to the same old stuff, like who'll look after the poor, who'll do this, who, you know, it's like people get that if the government made ball bearings and they were the only people who were allowed to make ball bearings, people would say without the government you wouldn't have any steering wheels or cars. I mean, people really believe that.
Yeah.
And that's the problem we face. It's an idea that you're incompassionate if you don't want the government to do these things. It's the major challenge. And it's interesting because all these people think they're so compassionate because they want to tax other people to give stuff to other people. They don't see, they get free virtue. Basically, they get to feel good about themselves and think that they're good people without actually lifting a finger to help anyone. And this is the major challenge I'm seeing, which is why I'm kind of in my experimenting quite hard with challenging the idea that it's somehow virtuous to hold a political position rather than actually take any action, because you've got all these mutual you get all this mutual backslapping for being on the left, like, yeah, we were right, we care, but without actually, you know, going on a protest is not feeding the hungry, it's not housing the homeless. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like, but that's the major challenge I think we face in perception. It's the perception that libertarianism isn't compassionate. And it's one of the reasons why I wrote an article, which, if you're listening, you can listen to scottishlibertarian.com/poverty, which is, you know, what libertarianism can do for the poor.
I also think that in terms of I mean, you called it right. You know, socialism is a problem. There's it's a weird thing. Everybody in Scotland, everybody's a socialist until there's one parking space left in the car park and they want it. You know, suddenly they're not a socialist anymore. And it's there's kind of a lot of that. I think there's also a sneering superiority because our larger neighbour England seems to be more conservative than us. We, as a nation, unfortunately, we seem to define ourselves by what we're not. You know, we're not England, and therefore, and we're more compassionate than that. There's a sneering superiority. We are more compassionate than England, and therefore we don't buy into all this free market stuff. We're all about looking after people and taking care of people, which of course is nonsense, you know. But that's kind of the way people look at things. So and also. As one old guy had said to me at one of the hustings, one of the political hustings that we'd had here for the election, he said to me, look, you know, you guys are not the Tea Party. You know, if you want that kind of thing, you know, we look after people in this country. If you want to be like that, why don't you go and live in America? And this idea that libertarianism is some sort of American import, the guy should read a book. You know,
Exactly.
we gave it to America. We gave it to the world. You know, Adam Smith and David Hume were born here in Scotland. You know,
and that's true. The Scottish have definitely influenced the libertarian movement for good.
The Scottish Enlightenment, man. You know,
Yeah, no question.
And so that really burns my toast when people start to think that, you know, that it's this is some sort of American. But we gave it to America. You guys probably perfected it, then screwed it up, and then exported it back to us. Like, you know, so it's always been here. You know, the emblem of the Scottish Libertarian Party in Scotland is a phoenix rising from the ashes. You know, and that phoenix is that free market. Sort of philosophy and free market thinking coming back and taking root again in Scotland and flourishing, and we hope that's what's going to happen. We're not optimistic, but it's worth fighting the good fight anyway.
Yeah, and the other thing that annoys, sorry if this is a non sequitur, but about this idea that, we take care of people, therefore we're socialists. The thing is that when the government starts doing things that the community is meant to do, like take care of people, the necessity for a community disappears. 6 out of 7 million British labourers used to be members of friendly societies. There's no friendly societies anymore. They don't exist. Unions used to give unemployment benefit to their workers and help them find jobs and stuff like that. Now they just go and lobby the government because it's seen as the government's job. Churches used to do work locally. People were involved in societies for mutual benefit.
It was much more communitarian rather than communist.
Exactly. You need that community, but now we live in such an atomized society and it's so capitalist. No, it's nothing to do with capitalism. It's the fact that you don't need to know your neighbours' names anymore, because if you're in trouble, the government's there to take care of you. It's people see problems with the world and it say someone should do something about that. They don't think, well, I'm someone, I could do something about that, because
someone else.
Because it's the government's job now. When it wasn't the government's job, then there was a reason for people to think it's my job. So basically, government is the end of people caring about each other, of doing things for each other, of looking after one another. Because now it's always someone else's job. So that's what pisses me off about that argument.
The way I look at this, it seems like the government has monopolized charity instead of letting churches take care of the poor, letting communities take care of the poor. Because, if there was someone poor in your neighborhood, you could just go help them out, give them a few bits of food or something, or you could even help them with a bit of money. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And now, because the government has monopolized that, they do it for you, and it's a problem because you don't have to know your neighbors. You can just get robbed by proxy, and allegedly they're helped.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they've got no reason to do a good job of that, because you can't perform. First of all, you can't defund them for doing a poor job, and what's more, they're not in competition with a bunch of other bodies that are meant to do the same thing. So you can't say, well, that body's doing badly, so I'm going to fund that body that's doing well. They've not got the market incentives to take care of the poor well.
And that is a problem when people aren't taken care of by the state. Because if they're not being taken care of by the state, they're going to get really angry, and the state's going to be told, oh, well, you got to keep taking care of us because we're not being taken care of well. But like you said, there's no recourse for the people to actually say, we need better health care, or we need better this or that.
Yeah.
They could always vote the politicians out, but these psychopaths always seem to come back. So,
and what happens if they do cure poverty? Well, then people start going, well, what's the need of government? There's no poverty.
Yeah.
People can afford their own schools, so they don't need public schools. They can afford their own health insurance, so they don't need national health service, when the private healthcare is much better than the national healthcare. The end of poverty is like more or less the end of the need for government. You might still need it to protect private property, in a minarchist way. But government's huge. The end of poverty is the end of the need for most of the functions of government.
Yeah.
Or alleged need. The alleged need for them. Mm-hmm. So every crisis is another excuse for government. They survive.
It's an opportunity for government to get bigger every time.
They survive on crises.
Just like the recent terror attacks in London, it seems like these government politicians are not letting these crises go to waste.
No, like I say, everyone's an opportunity to get some sort of legislation through that people would normally balk at. But here we go. Clearly something must be done. That's the cry, and government will ride to the rescue with draconian legislation that will eventually affect everybody and not just the people who it's supposed to combat. So that's the problem. Whether it be anti-terrorist legislation that forces people to, or tries to force people to carry ID cards, or clamps down on the internet, or clamps down on free speech,
or your right to a fair trial. We can arrest you without charge for 42 days if we suspect you of being a terrorist. That's all these sorts of things are brought in under the guise of protecting us from terrorism.
And people just go along with it. It's really, really sad to see.
Well, here's the thing. In the past, it used to be that the government could take certain measures in a time of crisis to clamp down on some civil liberties in a short-term way until the end of the war. The problem is now we're always at war. We're always at war. We were always at war during the Cold War, and then when that finished, we found a bunch of wars to get involved in the Middle East. And then now we're always at war since the War on Terror began 16 years ago. So do you know what I mean? It's like there's no end to it. There's no end to the breaches of civil liberties when you're always at war.
Well, when you look at even income tax, income tax in the UK was something that was brought in as an emergency measure during the Napoleonic War, because we needed, Napoleon was running rampant in Europe. He needs to be defeated, therefore we need income tax. And it was only ever supposed to be an emergency measure. And as I understand it, I think somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, in the UK Parliament, I think every year they have to go through the pantomime of putting through this emergency measure. Every year, and everybody universally votes it through. It's like almost like it's just a. What's the word I'm looking for here? When you just do something, it's just routine. It's just a routine thing now. We just put this emergency measure back through so we can keep the income tax going. So that's how it creeps in, and there's all sorts of, and that's the thing. Theresa May, Conservative Prime Minister, and she was poised even when she was Home Secretary. And your Home Secretary is in the UK is somebody who's responsible for the police and the courts and the prisons. And she was poised to bring in some real draconian measures when she was. In fact, she was a woman who banned certain speakers and certain foreign people from coming to the UK, such as Geert Wilders, the Dutch politician who had an anti-Islamic sort of mission. Now, I'm not about to say whether I think that Geert Wilders was right. I mean, a lot of what Geert Wilders has to say, I disagree with. Mm-hmm. But he had the right to say it,
right?
And yet he was barred and banned from the country, because he had views which were not politically expedient. So that's a Conservative Prime Minister that done that. So her track record on liberty and on civil liberties is not good, and that's a concern.
Yes, and getting worse with wanting to police the internet and all sorts of things. And what you said reminded me, because you were talking about how the income tax got put in and it's hard to take away, and how these infringements of civil liberties get put in, but they're hard to remove. Earlier on, you mentioned the UBI. Well, some libertarians say, well, see if we get the UBI through, people don't need a minimum wage because they've got enough money, so we'll be able, and they don't need labour laws, and they don't need this, and they don't need that, so we'll be able to remove all sorts of laws if we bring in the UBI. But if you see what generally tends to happen is when something new gets added, it just gets added. Other things do not get taken away. And it's a really risky road when you say, well, the government should do this or that as a temporary measure, because as soon as you put in a temporary measure, you've got a bunch of people whose job it is to enforce that measure, and they want their job to last forever and ever and ever. So if you had a government department dedicated to removing heroin addiction, I think you've just basically guaranteed that there will always be heroin addicts, or even more people.
They can always say, "Oh, there's going to be heroin, so we got to keep this department going."
Yes, and if they actually solve the problem, they'd be putting themselves out of a job, and not many people want to put themselves out of a job.
So let's talk about liberty activism for a second. I have been following the movement of libertarians moved to New Hampshire pretty closely. I listen to a talk radio show out of the States called Free Talk Live, and they cover it extensively since they are in New Hampshire. Is there any sort of liberty activism going on in Scotland, whether it be Bitcoin outreach or whatever?
We had one event recently.
Well, I mean, there's liberty activism, and we're looking at a part, because now that the election's over, we're going to be looking at things that we can do whether it be just we have an idea for libertarians in the community, which is just getting out there and doing things that need to be done, and showing that libertarians are also compassionate, and we believe that you don't need to have a government to help people out. So we're looking at ways to help people in the community in a real and practical way. So that's part of the activism. We've just started a student wing of the Libertarian Party, Scottish Libertarian Students. We had our first conference just last week. So and Abe Mamie is the guy here in Scotland who's in charge of that. So we're always looking at ways to, but we don't have. There's nothing as yet on the scale of what's happening in New Hampshire, and it'd be interesting. I would love to look at something like that. I know that Norway has also got something going on similar to what's happening in New Hampshire. So,
I was just thinking, if only this was communist strategy, if they just all moved to the same place, the same island, we could just sink the island. Sorry, wait, scratch that bit. No, but it would be great to buy a piece of land and just start a libertarian community. That'd be fantastic to do that. But we certainly don't have the wherewithal financially to do that with the Scottish Libertarian Party. But I'm really interested and excited by the Free State project that's going on in New Hampshire. And we had one of our podcasts was dedicated to that concept, and we had a guy called Vince Perfetto who came from America, from New Hampshire, to tell us all about that. And it's a real interesting project, and I think it's the way to go. It's not just, we get involved in the political, obviously as a political party, we get involved in the political process. That doesn't mean to say we have a whole lot of faith in the political process. We don't. It's just a way of drawing attention to the movement. But there's all sorts of tools you can have in your box. One is taking part in elections. Another one is actually doing political activism and looking at ways to make government irrelevant. That's right.
Like you mentioned Bitcoin. Yeah. That's great. Anything like that. And we're always open to that kind of thing.
I think that if libertarians were more organised, there's lots of counter-economics that we could do. With the technology that we've got, it's only a matter of time before someone creates some kind of online university that will get you better courses than you can get in any real university, and that can make the state redundant. There's things like that healthcare clinic, the Oklahoma Surgery Center, that does operations for 1/10 of the regular price, and people travel there to just get their healthcare over the counter instead of going through the bureaucratic. But that's only one, and the guy who runs that is a libertarian. He says fundamentally he's for the moral argument. There's lots more that can be done in terms of counter-economics, and ultimately I think that it is counter-economics that's going to win the day for liberty. It's technology. It wasn't about...
I think that's going to be an enabler.
Yeah.
But I think that for me, the most important thing is if we can to try and get our kids out of the grip and influence of the state. If you can do that, then you're on the road to freedom. Because while the state has a monopoly, and it kind of does here in Scotland, on educating children, the state is never going to produce citizens that are capable of living without it, and citizens that are capable of questioning it. So, I would love to be able to run some seminars on teaching parents who are interested on how they can homeschool their kids or get involved in small sort of community groups to maybe even take it in turns to teach their kids. But try and find a way to get, because it's difficult, because there's all sorts of legislation.
If you've got lots of skills and you're very self-sufficient, you don't really need government very much.
You don't. You can pretty much rely on yourself.
Government hobbles people. They go through 11 to 13 years of mandatory education system. They don't learn one skill that will fetch them £10 or $15 an hour. in a time that's long enough to become a concert pianist. They don't learn how to look after their finances. They don't learn how to deal with their emotions, how to form fulfilling relationships.
How to go to a job interview.
Yeah, how to resolve conflicts. All of these things are things that children could learn.
How to be a good parent.
Yeah, how to take care of their body. I mean, do most people know what their gallbladder does? I sure don't. Why? That's part of my body. Why don't I know how to take proper? Why do I know what my body does? It's crazy. These are the fundamental things that everyone should know, and they don't. So these are the things that we need to inculcate in our children. Make sure that they know all the most important things. How to use reason and evidence, how to argue effectively. These are the basis of being able to actually go out into the world and make a life happen for yourself. And you ain't going to learn any of it at school. So yeah, I can definitely second that.
I think all the skills that you guys mentioned, I actually learned from my parents. So a lot of skills I actually learned at home, which is actually really good. So I think parents also need to take a hand in their child's education.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my mother wasn't an academic. I mean, she barely finished school herself. She came from quite a poor background. She came from a large family. She was the oldest of about 12, 13 kids. 2 of which died in infancy. And my mother taught me to read and write before I went to school. And if my mother was capable of doing that, I think most people are capable of teaching their kids to read and write. And once you have those two skills, once you can read, you can pick up books and you can pretty much self-educate.
Exactly. So let's talk briefly about Atlas Shrugged and how it's paralleling our world today. I really love Atlas Shrugged. My best friend and I are reading it together. Both of us really enjoy it. We talk about it a lot. And it seems like there are a lot of parallels to society. Antony and I were talking on a Facebook post about how there was a London fire and all of a sudden people wanted to steal property from somebody.
Yes.
So let's talk about this for a second.
Yeah, well, sure. Well, I mean... Atlas. I mean, despite any misgivings, I read Atlas Shrugged about a year and a half ago. I found it hard going. I know what William F Buckley Jr meant when he said he had to flog himself to read it. Although, having said that, there was moments of absolute blinding genius and brilliance, interspersed by moments of, for me, kind of like almost Mills and Boone romance that I could have done without.
Yeah.
But it was nothing if not prescient. And I think, my favourite Ayn Rand book is We the Living. I think that's a phenomenal book, and that really brings home what communism does, how it starts, and how that slow ratcheting.
They're very similar books in that way, in the way that they both demonstrate a very similar phenomenon, which is the grinding growth of state.
Yeah, that ratcheting.
We the Living in a communist society, Atlas Shrugged in a mixed economy. Yeah. And I think the thing about this tower is that a bunch of people died, and a bunch of people had to flee their houses because a whole tower block of apartments went on fire. An absolute tragedy. And the opposition leader, who's a card-carrying socialist, said, well, there's some empty properties that are owned by people who don't live in London. We should just temporarily take it off them and house these people in these properties. And it's like, wait a minute. It's not a property right if you can just go, oh, well, they're empty, we're going to take them. That's where it begins. And everyone goes, well, they're just owned by a bunch of overprivileged rich people anyway. Like, who cares about them? But that's how they get you.
Yeah,
and I said, this is the end of civilization. If this happens, it's finished. Because first they go, oh, they're just empty houses. Then they go, well, there's a lot of other empty houses that rich people own. Why do they have the right to do that? Then they go, well, look, we have a responsibility to provide housing. I mean, look at these people who are living in this housing that we reacquisitioned from those rich people. Well, we should be responsible on allocating the society, and then it's game over, because then they can just take anything from anyone at any time. And as soon as you do that, you won't
living in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
You won't have anyone building any property for a start, because they know it can be acquisitioned off them at any time. But, the next thing's your bike. You're not using that bike while it's chained up. Well, bikes should be... And on it goes. And this is why I thought the parallels to Rand, Atlas Shrugged were shocking, because I thought, they probably won't... It's not going to happen anytime in the next year or two. But given the outswelling of sentiment and support of this idea of just acquisition other people's property, it's no big deal. It's not going to have any secondary or tertiary consequences or anything like that. They live in fairy tale land.
Yeah, they do.
The popularity of that, and people thinking, oh, I'm so compassionate, I care so much about poor people because I want to steal someone else's house to put them in it. Anyway, I could go on.
And it's not, I don't believe for a moment that there would have some sort of lottery allocation of these properties. Eventually it would end up that party apparatchiks, people who were family, people who were relations to people who were members of the Labour Party, they're going to be the ones who are going to get allocated these properties by the state. It's going to be all very corrupt and all very destructive. And like I say, before you know it, you're going to be living in Zimbabwe. And it sounds far-fetched, but, it's always the case. Nobody's living in a dictatorship until they are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's either Venezuela or Zimbabwe. You take your pick.
Yeah.
Both are bad alternatives. Is there anything else you want to share?
I was just going to mention as a tacked on point. Now, I don't have the exact story here in front of me, but there was a private company who just sold a bunch of houses, or properties rather, they weren't houses, they were apartments, at cost price to the government in response to this disaster. So they just basically forewent making a profit as a gesture to say, look, we're going to help rehouse these people who lost their houses by selling these apartments at cost price. But it's greedy capitalists, But and of course the government who actually was it the government who owned these properties that caught on fire, or was it a private-public partnership?
No, that building was council property.
Right. And they were warned of the fire hazard for a long time.
But the accusation obviously is it's austerity that's to blame. It's cutbacks. If the government hadn't been cutting back money, then more money would have been allocated to help house these people. More money would have been that. They wouldn't have skimped on safety procedures. They wouldn't have skimped on proper cladding on the outside of the building that wouldn't have caught fire. But the inquiry's ongoing. We still don't know for sure exactly what caused the fire and exactly why it burned so much. I mean, we suspect it looks like it was the cladding that was highly flammable. Which is not a good idea, obviously. But it's government. This is a government. This building was a government project. This building was taken care of by local government, and you have to fall back on if only they had more money allocated, then this wouldn't have happened. Which
something would have happened somewhere at some point.
Yeah. But the bottom line is, in terms of the people, it was a terrible, tragic accident. And people say, well, it could have been avoided. Yeah, generally most accidents could be avoided, But it's just, I feel
you don't have a crystal ball or a psychic vision to know.
I just think it's unfortunate that some sections of the left have tried to make, capital's the wrong word, but tried to make hay out of this and use it as political leverage. Instead of just letting the people, get on with it and get on with their grief. It's a terrible tragedy.
Yeah, and people were coming out of the woodwork to help, to bring food, to bring clothes, blankets, to offer couch space for people who needed somewhere to sleep. You know,
that people were a lot more efficient and a lot more capable than government was at housing these people and taking care of these people.
And that's the way it should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
People were really deeply moved to help.
Communitarian, not communist. You know, that's it. You know, people don't get that one's voluntary and the other one's coerced.
Well, the only other thing I would say is, if you enjoy the Anarcho agenda, I also recommend you check out the Scottish Liberty podcast. I think you'll enjoy our show, and I want to thank you, Riley, for having us.
Yeah,
you're welcome. It's been a pleasure. Where can people find your podcast?
You can type in Scottish Liberty Podcast into iTunes, or you can type it into YouTube, and you will find us both on iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud, and if your podcasting app's hooked into iTunes, then you should be able to access us with your podcasting app.
Excellent. If you want to listen back to previous archives of my show, Anarcho Agenda, visit anarchoagenda.libsyn.com.